So would you please welcome Mark?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me today, giving me the opportunity to speak. Let's just get straight into it. We all want to be happy.
Yes.
Yes? Yeah. Or you not had enough coffee yet. So, being happy is something that's been researched for years in great depth, but I'm not going to talk about that today. We've only got 20 minutes. So, what I am going to talk about is what are the things that make people look forward to have a happy city? What is neuroarchitecture, the role it plays in our society? And then, as long as I don't get cut off, a little bit about how neuroarchitecture has influenced a proposition that me and a team of people have put together to say this is what the legacy could be for Brisbane after 2032, not 2022, we're here now. So, the thing about neuroarchitecture, it's been around for about 25 years. Actually, buildings, it's been around for decades with casinos and retailers. They understand the neuroscience behind how we behave. Basically, our environment shapes our thinking, our emotions, our feelings, and our behaviors. And it's done in a way that we're not cognitively aware of. So when you think about retail, you can think about, why did I spend more than I intended to spend on this shopping trip? Why have I stayed longer? Why is it now that we go to shopping centres for our entertainment? Why is it that casinos have some very luxurious areas that are very sumptuous, and then they have areas that are very noisy and full of bright lights? What is going on here? Why is it in any shop or shopping centre or casino, there are very few views out of the window? Why is this done? It's very deliberate. Then you can think about churches and rulers. They've been doing this intuitively for centuries. Think about all the palaces that have been built. Think about the government buildings. You think about what's been done in North Korea, or in Russia, or China, or Britain, or here in Canberra. These buildings make statements. Churches have been doing it for decades or centuries as well. The idea of this large cathedral should be the largest, tallest building in the surrounding area in the medieval times, in the Gothic times. What was the reason for this? What were they trying to make? What statement were they trying to make? Winston Churchill says, we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. There is something going on about buildings that affect our moods. If you were all transported into a slum and had to live there, your mood, your behaviours would be very different to if you lived in Fig Tree Hill in a large estate. We live, and there's different grades obviously between all of this. So our environment has a big impact on our behaviours and our views of the world. Neuroarchitecture, I said, is about how it shapes our thinking. And this research is still expanding. They've worked in health, education, they're looking at work, and as I said, retailers and casinos and churches and government institutions have intuitively known about this, but now it's been formalized. So what are these 5 senses? What are the things that happen? We live the world through 5 senses. And they trigger certain parts of our brain. Our brain is still wired for the savannah. Technology has leaped so much further than our brains have. We haven't evolved at the same rate. So we're still hardwired to survive in the savannah, to hunt and forage and survive. We're not hardwired to living in a jungle, to a concrete jungle, a city environment, but we still react to the environment as if we're in the savannah. So whenever we encounter things, whether we are conscious or not, is this a fight or flight? Are we calm or are we agitated? These things happen when they've wired people's brains up, they've seen different parts of the brain light up in certain circumstances. So I grew up in a concrete jungle in Birmingham. I wasn't aware that I lived in a concrete jungle until I went on a Mediterranean cruise at the age of 11. 2,000 kids on this educational cruise for 2 weeks around the Mediterranean. I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time. But we arrived in Venice, and the next day they just said to these 2,000 kids, off you go, come back by 4 o'clock, unchaperoned. Can you imagine that happening now? I just loved Venice. It was a real eye-opener. It was that love of getting lost and finding yourself. You know, Venice is like this big maze. And you walk down little alleyways and it opens up into St. Mark's Square, for instance. There's this transformation of spatial dynamics going on. And I think it was that day at the age of 11 that I fell in love with architecture and the urban environment. In fact, my wife was looking at some photographs that I took at the age of 11. She said, there's not one picture of a person in this. It's all buildings. My wife only interested in taking pictures of people. So we have this conflict. So it solidified in about 1985 when I designed this shopping centre in Glasgow called Princess Square. And I didn't really like retail at the time until I did this project, because it was about spatial psychology. How do you move people through space? What draws them in that direction? What slows them down? What speeds them up? What makes them want to stay? What repels them? There was this dynamic going on that I was trying to work out what that I was doing. And everybody back in 1985 didn't really know anything about retail, but everyone pretended they were the authority. Now it's a very different kettle of fish. So let me explain what these triggers are for you to be aware of. Biophilia, being amongst foliage. This hospital is known as the hospital in the jungle. And it was quite seminal in helping work out that patients who are recovering from surgery recover 40% faster if they can see foliage than patients who can't see any foliage. Imagine that, 40% faster. That means the turnover of beds would be much greater, which means more people can get healthier. The physical benefits from that alone is quite mind-numbing, really. Then colour. Fast food chains, they always use red and yellow. It's agitating, it means fast, calm, it's exciting. Whereas green, organic foods, something like that, green is calming. It's sedentary, it's like a sanctuary. There's a whole range study on colour, but I just want you to give aware that colour has a big impact on us. Shapes. Back in the savannah, things that are spiky could be poisonous. Or if you meet a saber-toothed tiger, their claws and teeth, you're going, I don't like it. So when we actually see spiky things, there is this, ooh, I might say it. But then you get rounded shapes, soft shapes, and they feel more comforting. You know, there's, mind you, meeting a duck that size. It's a little bit out of scale, but you get the point I'm making. It's more inviting than spiky. Then the scale of the space, open large spaces versus narrow spaces. They have a sense of either being closed and safe or open and free. The scale, high buildings versus low environments. Again, do I feel like this, or what do I feel here? The one on the right is the glory of God. We're reaching out to heavens, we're touching heaven. But think of it from the person who's in a wheelchair. They have a permanent view at this level. Permanent view. What's it like for them going through space? Or as you remember as a kid, I don't remember crawling around at the age of 5, but certainly the world seemed really big as a 5-year-old. How many of you have gone back to that world and gone, God, it looks small? So our relationships change all the time to our space, depending on how old we are. Patterns. We are curious by nature. We have to be if we're out in the savannah. What's going on? Am I safe? Am I safe? So we look for patterns that are familiar because that keeps us safe. If we don't see a pattern that we understand, am I safe? Am I safe? And we try to look for patterns everywhere. So even like ink blots, or in this case, a cloud, we try and put an image in that's familiar. You know, think about the map of Australia. The west coast looks like a dog, and the east coast looks like a cat. Now, how many of you are going to go and check that out? Sound. Do we want to be in a quiet space, or the sound of water running? How many of you have been to time zone? It's a very different type of environment. It's done deliberately to get us excited, to get us pumped up. Whereas another environment is there to make us feel quiet, to settle the brain. Am I blocking the view for you guys?
That's all right.
Smell. Smell has a big impact. We only have to smell something and it will take us back to a time long ago. Smells are very powerful. The smell of coffee will go, for me, it's like I'm going there, but my son's sports shoes, I'm not going there. So be conscious of the smells. Some of them are quite deliberate. Singapore have patented a smell for their airlines, so no one else can use that smell. Lighting. Do we want to wander through dapple light-filled forests, or you go into an office and it's very bright? Soft lighting slows us down. Harsh lighting speeds us up. So you think about what is the light doing when lighting is used, what's the deliberate intent here? Touch has a very powerful thing. Do I want to run my hand down this balustrade on the left, or oh no, that one's got splinters? You know, we use touch to keep ourselves safe. What is safe, what is not safe? Temperature. Cold marble, both bench tops, one's timber, one's marble, one is hot. Warm to touch, the other one's cold to touch. Again, this is a way of determining, are we safe? The environment we're in. Are we in the savannah, in the heat, or in the Arctic in the cold? We build our environments in response to the climate we're in. So, before I move on to this, the point about the thing I want to make is that neuroarchitecture has a massive impact on our lives. It can change and shape how we're thinking positively. Not in the way that casinos do it, not in the way retailers do it. I call that the dark science. But as in most in life, there's always a plus and a minus to any science that's evolved. Now, the Institute of Neuroarchitecture, which just formed, has a 200-year plan to change government policy country by country by country. My colleague in London is looking after Europe, I'm looking after Southeast Asia at the moment. But we tend to open this up and change government policy so that everybody can live in an environment or that have to comply with neuroarchitecture principles. Because at the moment, 1% of the population determines what over 50% of the world population, how they live, because that's over 50% now live in cities. And yet 1% determine how we live, where we live, etc. And they only are driven by economics and compliance. No thought is actually really given to how will this environment that we are creating affect humans. And that is the purpose of neuroarchitecture. The Institute is to start influencing that change and that thought provocation. So that's the 200-year plan. Let me peg it down to a 10-year plan and talk a little bit about the Olympics. This is a consortium that are put together to influence how the city could look, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, or once-in-a-generation opportunity to make Brisbane an even happier city than it is now. To have a city that people will want to live in or want to visit often. Basically, this is a sensory experience. What I'm interested in is we live in a subtropical climate. And I said, we need to do this on steroids. And everyone said, well, no, Olympics and steroids aren't the words to go together. So I went, okay, amplify it. And what we're proposing is, these are boulevards, avenues, laneways, to put a blanket of foliage over the top of Brisbane. Now this is a bold thing, but what I've learnt in life is you can't do things by dipping your toe in the water, or as someone once said, you can't be half pregnant. You either do it or you don't do it. And if you do it tentatively, you won't pull it off. Can you imagine a city that has, in the city centre, a blanket of foliage, of avenues, boulevards, canopies of biophilia? Melbourne has its laneways, Sydney has its harbour, Brisbane has its bridges and boulevards. The bridges at the moment are really functional, but bridges can be romantic. Why not cover them in foliage? And for someone like me walking across these bridges, I get burnt. Why isn't there shade? So these boulevards make a statement about the city. This is the subtropical capital of Australia. It is another reason to visit Australia. It is another reason to come to Brisbane. The benefits of this, from a tourism point of view, is if visitors stayed one extra night every visit, it would add $4 billion to the economy per annum. That brings in all sorts of people into Brisbane, into Queensland, for commerce reasons. There's a financial benefit for doing this. For us city folks, the residents, we have another back garden, a place to live in, a place to hang out in. Here, as I was talking to someone, where all the natural fauna come back in, but I'm not so sure they'll want to see crocodiles coming through. And on that, my take for the mascot is Bluey. Yes. But there's probably copyright issues. These fan trails are lit up. Did anyone ever go to Auckland for the Rugby World Cup? So there was a walk from downtown Auckland over to Eden Park. It's about an hour and 15 minutes from memory, something like that. And there was street theatre, food, entertainment all the way through. So I'm saying take these boulevards, laneways, and light them up for any event. They can tell stories past, present and future about Australia, about Queensland, about Brisbane. They can engage people in so many ways. So when you got the State of Origin on, you would have it going from Roma Street over to Suncorp. When you've got the Ashes, it's from Roma Street over to the Gabba. When you've got the European Masters going on, or ballet going on, can light up around the South Bank. You can turn on different sections of these fan boulevards to become fan trails depending on what is going on. When you've got the Olympics on, you turn the whole lot on and have this 24-hour immersive experience with digital TVs along these fan trails, so that when you're walking between each stadium, you're still immersed in the games. It will become the walkable Olympic Games. It will become an experience that totally embraces people and turns spectators into tourists, because it's immersive and it encourages people to walk rather than just catch the train. Of course they can catch the train, but why not walk? It's possible. In Brisbane it is possible. compared to other cities that have hosted the Games. Brisbane actually has it in the heart of the city, whereas Homebush or out of Stafford in London or Stratford or Stafford, whatever it's called. So these fan trails can have different characteristics. So when you're around the Gabba, it has a different look and feel to, say, the one that runs under the existing motorway. We could make that quite gritty. It would be a little bit like Birmingham again. And you can turn the bridges into biophilic statements. It makes the walking enjoyable. It makes it different. And the thing that is important about this, from my perspective, is we should have a legacy, not for the few, not for the many, but for all of us. And I believe this proposal achieves that. So, neuroarchitecture benefits us in so many ways. It can reduce obesity, it can reduce depression, it can improve education, it can reduce hospital visits. It touches us in so many ways because its primary function is to improve our mental and physical well-being. This is the power that it has. And I think when you look at certain places or cities around the world that just look soulless, this is something that could be for everybody. As I've said, it's not a nice to have. It's not a luxury. In my world, it's a must-have. Thank you.
Questions for Michael?
Must be.
There's a fairly new building, I think it's the northern end of St Paul's Terrace, with exposed massive bracing, external bracing.
Yes,
Do you know the one I mean?
I think I do.
Yeah. I just wondered what feeling, does that give a feeling of great strength to the public, or do they think it's a whole lot of drainage pipes?
That's probably both. I would say an engineer's got carried away.
Yeah. Well,
Engineers always do
know.
everything with belts and braces.
Yeah, sure. No, but all architects and engineers know that triangulation is the strongest form.
Yeah, when you look at the pyramids, there is a certain symmetry around triangulation.
Mm.
And yes, it is angular and it's not rounded. There are subtleties to all of this, but personally, I don't like it.
Mm.
It does a job, and I do like the fact that they're celebrating the subtropical climate of indoor-outdoor being more seamless.
Mm.
I think there's a legislation that's just come through where roof gardens can be built which was originally considered an extra story, so no one did it. Now it's not considered an extra story. What I would like to see changed is at ground level, there's more that seamless indoor-outdoor experience. If they can make that a policy as well, because this is what Queensland's about. This is what Brisbane is about, this indoor-outdoor lifestyle. Europeans and North Americans would die for this. You don't realise how lucky you are. I've been here 6 years and I've been going, I love it.
I have a question. On an international level, is there any one country or several countries that you feel is leading the way in new architecture? For instance, when we've been to Japan, would you say Japan has a handle on it? They've got limited space, but they seem to make environments that are very attractive.
I've never been to Japan. This man has. He's lived there for 10 years.
Oh, I just thought there not been a consensus.
No, there isn't a country doing it as a whole. There isn't a city doing it as a whole. But in the world of aged care and dementia, there's a lot happening there. As you can see, as I talked about the hospital in the jungle, there's more and more of that happening. as I said, this is still an emerging practice, you could say, research. What I'm interested in, because I was going, the only way to get neuroarchitecture accepted as a standard is to commercialize it. Because at the moment it's either in the world of academics, or I hope there are no architects in the room, who see it as their point of difference. Not how will it make fiscal benefits, return on investments for property developers. Particularly, I'll just talk about my Princess Square. Glasgow was opened, 30 years ago or whatever, and 35, and it's still got 60% of the original tenants. It's never had to be refurbished because what it did was touch on basic needs of human beings, the anthropology of how people behave, what they want. And that's why it's been enduring. So what I'm working on with an actuary and accountant in London is how do we demonstrate the enduring return on investment using neuroarchitecture? Because insurance companies who fund a lot of this are looking for enduring solutions. So the work we're doing is creating an open library where people can put information in so that people around the world can use this library to demonstrate the fiscal and financial benefits.
Okay. Fascinating.
Just a quick one. The Sydney Olympics.
Yes.
And the feedback from the Olympic Committee at that time was Sydney would never get it, despite the obvious magnificent attractions of Sydney, until they had a luxury shopping precinct. And that's the reason that it was holding us back. We didn't have all the really expensive stores. Hence Castle Restaurant.
Well, there's a whole conversation on that one I can talk about.
We could go on forever. So well, thanks, Michael. I think we'll all go outside and look at our environment like this.
We'd be happier.
Because you all like to thank Michael for this.